He said it, sweet. We are putting together the first of two programmes about, yes, you've guessed it, the election. Now, before you turn me off, you should know that all of the reporters in this programme are our age, which means we might get to hear something different. In the last 2 weeks, we've been spending Channel 4's money like water to bring you stories from as far apart as New York and Coventry. Later in this week's show, the kids from Peterborough, like myself, investigate one of the big issues in this election, namely the health services. And in a moment, two kids from S4C will be looking at unemployment in Anglesey, North Wales. Our first story this week is brought to you by two Yanks from New York. But before we meet them, we wondered, how much does the average American in the street know about our election?
What do you know about their political system?
Not very much at all, I'm sorry to say.
And who's running against Margaret Thatcher?
I don't know who the candidates are. Who's in power?
I'm not sure, really.
And who's in power right now in Britain?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
Do you know that there's an election coming up?
No.
Do you know who's running in these elections?
No.
Do you know who's in power over there?
The Queen?
Is that what all Americans are like?
Well, a lot of them are like that. Most of the newspapers and the TV shows that they watch tend to leave out certain parts of the news and therefore lead to ignorance and misinformation.
Albert and Jamie, you're from something called Children's Express. What's all that about?
Children's Express is a news organization that's run by children. Our reporters are 8 to 13 and our editors are 14 to 18. We have 7 bureaus. We have one in Tokyo, Australia, New Zealand, and then 4 in the United States. We have a circulation of 9 million. And we try to report on children's issues and give a children's aspect to things that have to do with children, which is pretty much everything.
How did you choose the subject of your report this week?
We chose defense because it has a lot to do with children, because if there was a nuclear war, children would be affected, and also it's a lot to do with the elections. It's a big issue, and it's also in today's newspaper.
This is the United States Naval Base at Holy Loch in Scotland, where they service American Poseidon nuclear submarines. We came to Holy Loch because it is the focus of America's commitment to the defense of Europe. And, as we discovered, America's involvement in the defense of the United Kingdom is a crucial factor in the British election. To find out more, we went to talk to the Conservative Minister of Defense, George Younger.
What is your defense policy, personally?
Well, my defense policy and that of the Conservative Party is that we have to have a strong defense force as part of the NATO alliance, in which we and America are two of the biggest allies. We have a strong defense force in order that we can be sure to deter anyone from ever wishing to attack us.
Do you need the Trident missile?
Well, the present submarine missiles we have are called Polaris, and they are going to run out of time about 1995. They will become old, they will beginning to get beyond their useful life. So we have to modernize it. And by far the cheapest and best way of modernizing it is the Trident missile system.
How much will the Trident system cost in total?
It will cost in pounds about £9,000 million. That's about 3% of our total defence budget in Britain. £3 out of every 100 will be spent on Trident. Everything we spend on defence could very well be spent on something else, education, health, whatever. But if you don't have sufficient defence, it's no use having the best education system in the world if you're liable to be overrun and attacked by somebody who's got bigger weapons than you have.
So what you're talking about is a peacekeeping missile?
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it. Having this deterrent has prevented war of all kinds for over 40 years.
So what does the Alliance Party think? We traveled back to London to talk to their defense spokesman.
What is your personal defense policy?
My personal defence policy is pretty much the same as the Alliance defence policy, I think. I'm in favour of Britain continuing to have nuclear weapons unless and until we can do a deal with the Soviet Union. which reduces the threat of their nuclear weapons to us.
Why should Great Britain be a nuclear power?
The Soviet Union has nuclear weapons, the United States has nuclear weapons, the French have nuclear weapons. If we gave them up, we'd be the first country in the world to do that, and I'm only prepared to do that if, in fact, we get substantial concessions that make us feel safe and comfortable without nuclear weapons.
What kind of nuclear weapons are you planning to get?
The Conservative government wants to buy your American Trident system. We say that's too big and too powerful, and we probably would be able to do rather better, rather cheaper, with a series of cruise missiles rather than this great big Trident system.
How much would they cost?
Well, as I understand it, the sort of current price for a cruise missile, if you went in and asked to buy one, is about $3 million. So it's a good deal cheaper than the Trident system.
And what would you do with the money left over?
If we had a substantial sum of money left over, and we think we would plough that back into improving conventional defence. Not necessarily buying more guns and tanks and planes, but things like having ammunition where we need it.
Would you use all the money on defence?
All the money that was saved from the defence budget, if we had a cheaper nuclear deterrent than Trident, would go back into the defence budget. Yes, we're committed to spending the same amount of money on defence as is the present government.
In the London district of Kennington, we called on Dennis Healey of the Labour Party.
Hello, how are you?
Mr. Healey was once Britain's Minister of Defence.
What is your personal foreign policy?
Basically, we want to try to move towards peace by getting agreement between the Western countries and the communist countries to get the world back to peace, to end the Cold War, stop the arms race. And we think that now that we've got a change of government in the Soviet Union, Mr. Gorbachev's in power, there's the first real chance of that since the atom bomb dropped at Hiroshima.
And what about your defence policy?
Well, we think that it's not possible to fight or win a nuclear war. We've got to concentrate on having a way of preventing other people from starting a war which doesn't depend on blowing up the world. And we think the right way to do that is to cancel our own nuclear weapons programs and spend a very large amount of money we save on building up our conventional forces.
But don't you need nuclear weapons as a deterrent?
The real problem is that if you start using nuclear weapons, nobody now believes that you can limit the use. It's bound to go up to an all-out thermonuclear holocaust.
But you want the approval of the United States.
We believe that our security depends on working with the United States, and I still believe that it's the best guarantee of security for Europe and peace for the world until we can get this overall deal with the communist countries, which I think is now possible. It'll take a long time to achieve.
Basically, all the parties seem to think that defence comes before everything else. The Conservative Party and the Labour Party are taking opposite views. One wants to completely get rid of all nuclear weapons. One wants to stock up on nuclear weapons.
Cartwright's views were that he wanted the Polaris and that he wanted to build up on conventional forces. And Mr. Younger, he wanted to keep the Polaris, and he also wanted to get the Trident system. Health and education, it seems like everyone's trying to just not as interested in it. They care about it, all the politicians, but they need defense first. They want defense first.
If you spend all your money on defense and you don't spend anything on domestic problems, what are you going to have left to defend? Nothing.
I think that the politicians' priorities are what they want, and what they want is what they think is right.
If people were educated to be nonviolent, to help other people, to not think, well, everyone else is an enemy, then there wouldn't be wars. There wouldn't be a need for weapons. I think that the defense problem has a lot to do with kids, because if there's a nuclear war, kids are going to be affected also. And I think that if this money spent on defense and missiles is being taken out of education and health, I think that affects kids.
Our second report this week comes from another regular team of young professional reporters, this time from Wales. John Ed, tell us how you made your report.
Well, as a team of cub reporters for S4C, which is Channel 4 in Wales, we have our meetings at their offices either in Cardiff or Carnarvon, and then we come together to sort out everybody's individual ideas, which could be things of local interest or current affair things, or just anything that really appeals to children. And then we have a final briefing from Sian Thomas, who's a presenter with S4C, and then we're sent on our way. In our case, it was to Anglesey to interview the 4 candidates there.
Right. And then Ynys Môn, the election, lead up to the election. Sianed, who are you going to see? Have you got everything fixed up, Sianed?
Yeah, we've arranged with the 4 candidates, Roger Evans, Eamon Jones, Colin Parry and Ian Evans as well. So.
Right, and where are you going, Sean?
To Holyhead down Llangefni.
Oh, you better get move on then. Right, just carry on with things here. So you two better shift, actually, if you're going to get there in time. See you later, OK?
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Right then, the athletics. You've got everything you said, yes? More or less, right.
Môn Mam Cymru, Anglesey the Mother of Wales. A reputation earned over the centuries by the island's ability to provide an abundance of farm produce and mineral wealth for the rest of Wales. By the 1980s, Ynys Môn, or Anglesey, could more accurately be described as the widow of Wales, with over 2,000 small holdings having disappeared since the Second World War. More than 20% of the island's working population are on the dole. The windswept island remains predominantly rural, but the main employer outside agriculture is the ferry port of Holyhead, providing up to 1,500 jobs. What are the main issues for you in this election?
Unemployment, definitely.
That's the major one?
That's the major one, yeah.
What about unemployment here? It's very high, over 20%.
Yes, yes. It's even higher where I come from. I come from Liverpool. I'm concerned about it there too.
I wish there was more work here for the young lads today, because a lot of them today, they're on the streets and they don't know what to do with themselves. I wish there was more work coming on the island.
Okay, thank you.
Unemployment, of course, and look after the farmers. Look after the farmers, we look after the families.
A major problem in Anglesey is rural depopulation, coupled with a steady influx of retired people from outside Wales. This, together with the brisk seasonal tourist trade, brings mixed blessings. On the one hand, the island's economy is boosted by the visitors, but on the other, there are profound fears that the island's Welsh character and identity are being eroded.
If you're going to make Ynys Môn a tourist attraction, isn't that creating just seasonal jobs for the youngsters?
Yes, of course there are dangers with tourism, but would you really have that prosperity not here at all? Yes, of course, there are some jobs which are more attractive than others, but we've got to persuade all sorts of businesses to come here and flourish and prosper.
Is it because of the influx of English people that your predecessor did win the seat here?
Well, you know very well that I think the statistic is that 61% of the electors of this constituency speak Welsh. I think it's very crude, very unfair, and appallingly bad publicity for Ynys Môn to talk about bringing in outsiders. That's not a warm Welsh welcome, and that's not going to provide young people here with jobs if that kind of story comes about.
But are you anti-English, as the Tories say?
Certainly not. Again, that is something that the Tories constantly throw at us because they fear the Plaid Cymru position here in Anglesey. They know that only we can win the seat, and therefore they use these kind of smear tactics. What they know is that Plaid Cymru is the only party that can unite us, the only party that can actually have both groups here on the island living harmoniously.
Do you see that by winning the seat in Anglesey, it will then open the way for you to the rest of Wales?
Yes, we see it as an extremely good platform for us because having won 3 seats here in Gwynedd, as we are very confident of doing, we can then move into other parts of Wales, and what we would like to see in this election is Plaid Cymru gaining ground not only here in Gwynedd but in other parts of Wales, which will then secure a platform for the next election.
There is a tradition here on Anglesey that the people like to look at the actual candidate and speak to the candidate and talk to him. The party label is not as important here as it is in other places.
What do you have to offer the farmers of Anglesey?
Well, this is because where the Conservative Party has lost so much support in Anglesey and in other rural constituencies in Wales over the last 5 years, because the Conservative Party's agricultural policy has been absolutely disastrous for the smaller farming units, which is of course the preponderance of the farming industry in Wales. It's been very good for the barley barons and the wheat barons in the southeast, in East Anglia, but it's had a tremendous effect on Welsh farms, because the Conservative view of agriculture is that economic units have to make sense on paper.
What are you going to do to Anglesey then, as a constituency?
Well, I think you've got to look at priorities, and I think that in the constituency of Anglesey, the priority at the moment is unemployment. And we are the only party that's offering a real policy for reducing unemployment in Anglesey. We're making a firm commitment that throughout Wales we'll produce 65,000 jobs in our first 2 years, and that relates in Anglesey to an absolute minimum of 1,000 reduction in unemployment, and we'll be certainly aiming to get 1,500 people off the dole in our first 2 years of government. Now, that is the most important issue to the people of Anglesey, and we're the party who've got the policies to bring about what the people of Anglesey want in this respect.
The fight for Ynys Môn has generally been regarded by political observers as a three-horse race between Labour, Conservative and Plaid Cymru. Looking at the line-up in Ynys Môn, no self-respecting gambler would risk his money on the outcome.
Plaid Cymru, yes.
Plaid Cymru?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Conservatives.
Anybody except Mrs Thatcher?
Conservatives. I would support the Labour government.
Plaid Cymru.
We're not supposed to say anything. Don't mind doing. We're not supposed to say anything to him.
Our last story this week comes from my hometown, Peterborough. Jonathan, can you tell me how you chose the subject of your report?
Well, there was a group of us from Buttonwood Community School, and we had research notes on some issues in the general election, and we analysed these notes and found the main areas, and they were just three really: level of benefit, housing, and the one which we got a lot of reports on, health.
Behind me is Peterborough Cathedral. It was started in 1116.
Behind me is the shopping precinct, pedestrianised in 1981.
In 1116, there was no National Health Service.
In 1987, there is a health service, but what condition is it in?
When the consultant told me that I needed an operation to restructure the ligaments in the knee, I thought that maybe, 6 weeks, a month, maybe. But I thought it was a serious enough condition to warrant going onto the waiting list fairly quickly. I didn't realise it would take 2.5 years to get it sorted out.
Paul Stark is a PE teacher at Brettonwood Community School in Peterborough. I asked him how he injured his knee.
I actually did the injury, 1983, which is some time ago, playing rugby. I twisted the knee, actually in the game of rugby.
So how do you feel about having to wait so long for this treatment?
Very frustrated. I really feel that it should have been sorted out a long time ago, bearing in mind that, it does affect my job and my career, and I need to be in fit working order, and that, it needed to be done straight away.
Mr Starkey's wait for treatment is shared by many other patients. I asked Alan Burns, the District General Manager of Peterborough Health Authority, for the range of patient waiting times.
General surgery 28 to 88 weeks, urology 4 to 8 weeks, ENT 3 to 36 weeks, ophthalmology 1 to 28 weeks, oral surgery 2 to 20 weeks, plastic surgery 28 weeks, gynecology 2 to 32 weeks, geriatric medicine 5 weeks, general medicine 3 to 4 weeks, cardiology 2 weeks, dermatology 8 weeks, neurology 12 weeks, and paediatrics 3 weeks.
In Peterborough, every candidate for the coming election we spoke to agreed that spending more money on the health service was the only way to reduce hospital waiting lists. But how much more money should be spent? Zilahuma Ibrahim asked Dr Brian Mulwiney, the Conservative MP for Peterborough in the last Parliament, why people should vote for him again.
Well, as far as health is concerned, first of all, because we have so much increased spending on health here in the city. But that's the main reason why they should be voting for the Conservative government, because the Labour Party claims that it cares about health in Peterborough. But in 1976, it refused to sanction the building of the 2nd District Hospital. We didn't talk about caring, we actually cared and built it. And that's why so many of the people of Peterborough are going to vote Conservative in this general election.
Well, I welcome any new hospital, but the new Peterborough District Hospital is going to create more problems for the health service in this area, simply because the government are not going to give us the money in order to exploit that new hospital to the fullest extent. And the fact is that when the Peterborough District Hospital is opened, unless there's a change of government giving Peterborough more money, there is going to be a fall in the overall level of healthcare in this district.
David Green, the Alliance candidate in Peterborough, says that his party would spend an extra £1 billion per year on the health service.
Now, how we would pay for that, I mean, I can discuss that if you so desire. Politicians in a run-up to a general election will give you a whole shopping list of what they want to spend money on, but when you start asking them about where the money's coming from, they get a bit iffy on the subject. Both the Alliance and the Labour Party, for that matter, are looking to savings in the national budget. We reckon that we could shake down £1 billion worth of savings in the national budget.
A different view of the problems of the health service comes from Nigel Callaghan of the Green Party.
I think the main difference is that the other parties, although they put over that they're very different in terms of their health policy, in fact, we see it that the only thing they're arguing about is exactly how they're going to pay for their health provision. They don't dispute what they mean by health. We actually say that the whole principle of what they mean by healthcare is in fact wrong, that healthcare is seen as something based on a health service, which is basically for repairing people, that it waits till people get sick and then tries to patch them up, which is not only expensive in financial terms, it's expensive in human terms.
Whoever is elected to represent Peterborough will come here to take his seat in the House of Commons.
But the amount spent on Peterborough's health service is decided at national level.
So we first spoke to the present Junior Minister of Health, Edwina Curry.
In fact, in response to a letter, Mrs Curry came to meet us at Bretton Woods. Zilla Hoomer asked Mrs Curry what had affected the National Health Service during the 8 years of Conservative control.
Money obviously makes a big difference, and we've pushed that funding up from just under £8 billion to now £21 billion this year. And it does show because we've got new hospitals all over the place, we've replaced a lot of old stock, we've put in some new clinics, and we have taken on a lot more staff. And we've also done surveys that have found that 88% of the people who've had treatment recently in the health service are satisfied. So we feel very secure about that. Something like 6 million satisfied customers. They can't all be wrong.
From my point of view, I don't think that progress has been made in this sort of cost effectiveness. I think, if anything, the service has deteriorated and we have gone backwards.
Mrs Miranda Ward had a baby in hospital in 1982, then another in 1986. What changes did she notice in the service?
In 1982, as a mother, you went into hospital and you were only expected to provide the basic necessities for yourself in the form of night dresses and toothpaste and, you know, your basic sort of individual needs. Most of the things, in fact, all of the things that were necessary for your baby when the baby was born was provided for by the hospital. This was not the case in 1986.
We are talking about expanding the health service to meet the growing demand. We currently, as a country, spend less on our health service than, say, America or other European countries do as a percentage of overall national income.
We're very keen that the taxpayer, which is effectively everybody, gets good value for money. There's no harm in saying to health authorities, we want to make sure that you're not wasting money. But at the end of the day, the test shouldn't be how efficient that hospital is or that doctor is. It should be what's the quality of service.
I'd rather see hospital stay as pleasant, as cosy and possibly intimate is probably the word, as it was when I was in 1982. I think that has somehow been taken away.
Well, that's it for this week. In next week's show, we bring out the big guns. You'd think that since we are so young, no party leader will be prepared to talk to us at this busy time. But if you think that, you'd be wrong. In next week's programme we have interviews with David Owen, David Steele, Neale Kinnock and Margaret Thatcher, all of whom thought we were important enough to grant us an interview. Don't miss it. Bye. Roll the roller, Dale. Bye.